There was a season in your life when God felt close enough to touch. You would wake up with a quiet awareness that He was already in the room. You would walk through your day with a softness in your heart, as if your steps were guided by a presence you couldn't see, but somehow always felt. But something changed. Not suddenly, not violently, just slowly. At first, you didn't even notice it. Life became a little louder. Your schedule became a little fuller. Your phone demanded a little more of your attention. And without meaning to, you began moving through your days differently than before. You still believed in God. You still loved Him, but the gentle awareness, the quiet nearness, began to fade like the last light of evening. Not because of a great sin, not because of rebellion, but because of the small, ordinary habits that you assumed were harmless. The scroll before bed, the noise filling every empty moment, the busyness you called responsibility, the anxiety you renamed just how I am, the comparison you told yourself was normal. These things didn't look dangerous. They didn't look sinful. They didn't even look wrong. They just looked modern. They looked like everyone else's life. But little by little, they pulled your heart in directions you never meant to go, until one day, you realized something painful. Your soul felt tired, in a way sleep couldn't fix. You had become spiritually present, but emotionally distant, physically active in your faith, but quietly drifting on the inside. And in that gentle silence, the Lord whispered, not with anger, but with deep tenderness, "My child, you did not wander far in one night. You drifted through 100 small choices. So let me bring you home, through 100 small choices again." This message is the beginning of that return. Not a dramatic rescue, but a slow reawakening, a soft invitation to look again at the everyday habits you've learned to call normal, but I call dangerous. Before we continue, let your heart settle, let the noise inside you quiet down, and whisper this prayer, like a child leaning close to a loving father. Lord, reveal the habits I have stopped noticing. There was a time when you could sit in silence and feel your heart settle into God's presence, when stillness was not something to escape, but a doorway where your soul could breathe. But slowly, quietly, another rhythm began to take its place. At first, it was innocent. A few minutes of scrolling after a long day, a small distraction before bed, a moment to unwind while your mind felt tired. But the moments multiplied, and the habits deepened. And now, without even thinking, your thumb moves faster than your thoughts. You scroll not because you choose to, but because your body has learned the motion better than it has learned rest. You don't notice the shift at first. No one ever does, but your spirit does. Your spirit always knows when it is being slowly drowned in tiny streams of noise. What used to be quiet space for God is now filled with flashing reels, moving images, other people's voices, other people's lives. You don't mean to run from your own life, but scrolling becomes a small escape from the emotions you don't want to face, the loneliness you don't want to name, the questions that feel too heavy to carry. And so you scroll, and scroll, and scroll, not because you are addicted to entertainment, but because you are exhausted and looking for somewhere to rest, somewhere easier than the honesty of sitting still with God. But the rest scrolling promises never reaches the soul. It numbs you, but it does not heal you. It fills your mind, but it empties your heart. And in the quiet ache that follows, the Lord leans close and whispers gently, "Beloved, you will not find your peace in the glow of a screen. Lift your eyes to me again." He is not angry. He is not disappointed. He is not shaming you. He is simply calling you back to the place where your soul remembers how to breathe, not by throwing your phone away, not by hiding from technology, but by reclaiming the sacred moments you've accidentally handed over to noise. A moment in the morning when your Bible opens before your apps do. A moment in the afternoon when you pause long enough to notice His presence beside you in the ordinary. A moment at night when your heart speaks before your screen distracts. You were not created to live with your eyes always downward. Your spirit is starving for sky, for light, for the face of the one who still waits for you in the quiet moments between breaths. Look up, child. He is still here, and He has not stopped trying to get your attention, even in the scrolling. There are moments in life When anxiety slips into your heart, so quietly that you begin to believe it has always belonged there. At first, it feels like a visitor, an unwelcome one, sitting at the corner of your thoughts. But over time, it becomes familiar, predictable, almost comforting in its consistency. And somewhere along the way, you gave it a name. This is just who I am. You didn't mean to say it. You didn't mean to claim it. But when a burden stays long enough, the mind grows weary of fighting it, and the heart begins to adapt to what was never meant to stay. You start reshaping your life around your fears, choosing the safer path, the quieter choices, the familiar routines that don't challenge the tremble inside. Others see you functioning, smiling, managing, but they don't see the weight pressing on your chest in the hours no one else witnesses. You convince yourself that this must be your personality, that some people are bold, some are confident, and you are simply the anxious one. But in the deep, sacred places where God sees you clearly, He whispers something different. This is not who you are. This is what has attached itself to who you are. Anxiety is not your identity. It is a chain disguised as something familiar, and the enemy loves how gently it settles, how quietly it wraps, how softly it claims ownership over a heart that was made for courage. You were never designed to live bracing for disaster, to wake each morning with a tremble beneath your ribs, to interpret every unknown as a threat. Those are not signs of personality. They are signs of a soul that has been carrying far too much for far too long. And in that heaviness, the Lord draws near, not with accusation, but with compassion deeper than your worry has ever reached. He places His hand over the trembling parts of you and says softly, "Give me what you've learned to live with. Give me what you've mistaken for yourself." Anxiety loosens, not when you fight harder, but when you stop naming it as yours. Your story is not built on the tremble in your chest. Your story is built on the one who holds your chest, your breath, your future, your every uncertain moment. You are not defined by the storm inside you. You are defined by the God who sits with you until the storm passes. Lift your eyes, beloved. Let Him rename you. Let Him breathe peace into the places where fear has lived unchallenged. You are not an anxious person. You are a child learning to hand back the burdens you were never meant to claim as part of your identity. There was a time when you used to move slowly enough to notice God in the ordinary. A quiet sunrise felt like a conversation. A simple prayer felt like a doorway. A small moment of stillness felt like coming home. But the world around you sped up, and so did you. Little by little, your worth became intertwined with how much you could accomplish. Your value began to sound like a checklist. Your peace depended on how productive you were. People admired your hard work. They respected your drive. They praised your ability to carry so much without breaking. And a part of you liked that. A part of you depended on that. But the busier you became, the quieter God felt. Not because He walked away, but because your life grew loud enough to drown the whisper that once guided you. You began waking up, already running, already planning, already calculating what needed to be done before the day even started. Prayer became a background thought. Rest became a luxury. Stillness became something you'd do later. You were serving God with your schedule, but losing Him with your heart. And yet everyone around you called it maturity, responsibility, dedication, strength. But heaven had another name for it. Distraction dressed as devotion. Because productivity, not God, quietly became the place where you sought identity, security, and approval. And one day, without meaning to, your busyness began to feel holy, more holy than sitting still with Him. But in that quiet, exhausted place, beneath all your accomplishments, the Lord leans close, His voice gentle enough to break your hurry. "My child, I did not ask you to carry the world. I asked you to walk with me." He isn't angry that you are overwhelmed. He isn't disappointed by your full schedule. He isn't rebuking your desire to do well. He is simply reminding you that a hurried soul cannot hear a whisper. You were never meant to measure your value by your output. Your identity was never supposed to rise and fall with how much you complete in a day. God is not impressed by your exhaustion. He is moved by your attention. And sometimes, the holiest thing you can do is stop, sit, breathe, let go of what you were never meant to carry. He does not want your productivity as much as he wants your presence. Return to him in the slow, sacred places where striving ends and belonging begins. You are not a machine. You are not a schedule. You are not a task list. You are his. And he calls you back, not to do more, but to be with him again. There are wounds you never learned how to speak about. Quiet aches you carried alone because you didn't want to burden anyone, didn't want to look weak, didn't want to fall apart in front of people who expected you to stay strong. So instead of bringing the pain into the light, you found small ways to silence it. A show to distract you, a snack to soothe you, a scroll to numb you, a routine to bury you. Not sinful in themselves, just small comforts that allowed you to feel okay for a little while. But over time, those small comforts became a refuge, a place you ran to whenever the heart became too heavy to hold. And slowly, almost invisibly, your emotions stopped rising, stopped speaking, stopped reaching for God. You adjusted, you functioned, you smiled, but the deep parts of you fell asleep, and it scared you how easy it became to turn off your heart instead of tending to it. But the truth is tender. You didn't numb yourself because you were selfish. You numbed yourself because you were hurting and didn't know how to heal. Yet every time you slipped into distraction, something holy within you whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Beloved, don't hide your heart from me. I can only heal what you bring into my hands." God never asked you to be emotionless. He never asked you to pretend you're fine. He never asked you to silence the heaviness by drowning it in noise. He asked you to come just as you are, with the ache, the tears, the numbness, the confusion, the questions that scare you. Because emotional numbness may keep you from breaking, but it also keeps you from being healed. Comfort can quiet the pain, but only presence can restore the soul. And in the quiet of your room, when the distractions settle and the heart has nowhere else to run, he whispers again, gentler than breath, "Let me feel this with you. You don't have to walk the darkness alone. I will sit with you until the light returns." You do not have to fear your emotions. You do not have to outrun your sorrow. You do not have to numb the places where you feel too much or nothing at all. God is not asking you to be stronger. He is asking you to be honest, because healing begins not when you suppress the pain, but when you let him hold it. And slowly, beautifully, your heart will wake again. Your feelings will rise again. Your soul will breathe again. Not because you numbed the darkness, but because you let the light in. There are days when you wake up content, steady, grateful, quietly aware of God's goodness in the small corners of your life. But then, almost without warning, one picture, one announcement, one achievement shared online can make that contentment collapse like sand in your hands. It happens so quickly, so silently, so predictably that you barely notice the shift. Your heart sinks, not dramatically, just enough for joy to dim. Your thoughts begin to compare, not intentionally, just enough to make your path feel smaller than it did a moment ago. And in that subtle ache, a quiet lie forms. You're behind. You're not enough. Your life should look like theirs by now. You don't want to believe it. You know better. You know God writes every story differently. Yet the more you look outward, the less you recognize the beauty of what God is doing inward. Comparison steals softly, slipping into your heart, like a shadow at dusk, quietly blurring the edges of your God-given identity. You start measuring your worth by someone else's blessing. You start doubting your calling because someone else's seems louder. You start overlooking your own miracles because theirs look more impressive from a distance. And slowly, your eyes drift from God's hand to everyone else's timeline. But in that fragile moment, before the feeling anchors too deeply, the Lord places his hand over your racing heart and whispers with tenderness strong enough to break the lie. Child, your story is not late. Your story is not small. Your story is mine. He reminds you, not with thunder, but with gentleness, that he has never recycled destinies, never copied purposes, never repeated lives. He writes with intention. He unfolds with precision. He leads with love. And nothing about your journey is accidental. Comparison blinds you to the work he is doing right now, the quiet growth, the hidden healing, the slow unfolding that cannot be captured in a single picture or measured against someone else's moment. So he invites you back into your own life, back into your lane, back into the sacred story he is writing in you, one chapter at a time, one surrender at a time, one act of faith no one else sees. Look up, beloved, not at their timeline, not at their blessings, not at their applause. Look at the one who has never been late with anything he has promised. Your story is not behind. Your story is becoming. And heaven is not comparing you to anyone else. Neither should you. There are certain battles you didn't mean to carry this long. Patterns you never intended to repeat. Choices you promised yourself you would never make again. Yet somehow, they linger in your shadow, close enough to follow you, quiet enough not to alarm you, familiar enough to feel manageable. And because you didn't know how to break free, you learned how to rename them. You stopped calling them what Scripture calls them. Instead, you softened the words, like placing a blanket over a fire that never stopped burning. It's just my struggle. It's only a phase. I'm working on it. God knows my heart. And yes, He does know your heart. But He also knows when you're using softness to protect something that is slowly harming you. Sin rarely looks dangerous at first. It looks comforting. It looks familiar. It looks like something you can control. But the longer you let it sit beside you, the more it grows. Not loudly, but quietly, tugging your heart 1 inch farther from the freedom God has always intended for you. And the most painful truth of all is this: you can become so used to the chain that you begin to mistake it for jewelry. But the Lord, who sees deeper than your habits, your excuses, your softened language, leans close, His voice both tender and unshakably firm. Beloved, I did not free you halfway. Do not settle for a life where bondage is renamed as struggle. He is not shaming you. He is not angry with you. He is not disappointed that you are still wrestling. He is calling you out because He loves you too deeply to let you stay where you are. True freedom doesn't begin with perfection. True freedom begins with honesty. Not the kind of honesty that exposes you to the world, but the kind that opens your heart before God's gentle presence and says, Lord, this is sin, and I don't want it anymore. When you name it truthfully, its power begins to break. When you stop excusing it, its voice begins to fade. When you stop protecting it, He begins to heal the place where it once lived. God does not ask you to overcome by yourself. He asks you to stop pretending you're not in a battle, so He can step into the fight with you. There is no shame in needing mercy. There is only danger in refusing to acknowledge where mercy is needed. Lift your eyes, beloved. Let the softness fall away. Let truth return to your lips. Let healing begin where excuses once lived. You were made for freedom, not the halfway kind, but the holy kind that reaches into the bones and rewrites your life from the inside out. There is a certain kind of praise that feels warm when it touches you, a certain kind of approval that settles in your chest like sunlight after a long winter. You didn't chase it at first. You didn't crave it. It simply felt good to be seen, to have your effort noticed, your skill appreciated, your strength acknowledged. But slowly, something in your heart began to lean toward that feeling, a little more than before, a little more than you expected. You started working harder, not just because it was right, but because the applause felt like oxygen. You started pushing farther, not just out of discipline, but because achievement gave you a sense of worth you didn't know you were missing. And soon, your identity began to weave itself into the things you accomplished, the tasks you completed, the goals you reached, the success you earned. You didn't notice the shift at first. No one ever does. But deep within, your soul started to panic. When the applause quieted, when no one noticed your effort, when your work went unseen, silence felt like failure. Stillness felt like insignificance. Rest felt like losing ground. And in that restless place, a small fear formed inside you. Without what I do, who am I? The world around you praised your productivity, celebrated your accomplishments, and told you this was what success looked like. But heaven whispered a different truth, one deeper, older, truer than any achievement your hands could build. You were mine before you ever did anything for me. God has never measured you by your output. He has never tied your identity to your performance. He has never needed your success to value your existence. He calls you beloved before he calls you useful. He calls you his before he calls you to serve. And he knows when your accomplishments have begun to define you more loudly than his voice does. So he gently interrupts the rush of your striving heart and whispers, "Child, your worth is not in what you achieve. Your worth is in who you belong to." When you let applause validate you, silence will terrify you. When you let success name you, failure will destroy you. When you let productivity hold you, rest will feel like defeat. But when God names you, when his voice becomes the anchor of your identity, you can finally breathe again. You can work without needing to prove anything. You can serve without losing yourself. You can succeed without becoming enslaved to praise. You can rest without fearing you will disappear. Your identity was never meant to be built by your hands. It was meant to be held by his. Let him remind you who you are. When no one applauds, no one notices, no one praises, because the truest version of you is the one who stands in quiet belonging, deeply loved, fully known, eternally his. Holiness rarely arrives in a burst of lightning. It does not descend with shock or shout or spectacle. More often, it comes quietly, the way morning light moves across a dark room, not demanding attention, but slowly revealing what has always been there. In the same way, the drift away from God does not happen in earthquakes. It happens in inches, in habits that seem harmless, in choices that feel small, in rhythms that look normal to everyone but heaven. But grace awakens you just as gently, not by condemning you for drifting, but by showing you the way home. You may look back over these 7 habits and feel the sting of recognition, the quiet truth that some of them have lived in your heart a long time. You may feel sadness or relief or a trembling desire to begin again. All of these are holy. All of these are welcome, because God never reveals what is broken to shame you, but to free you. And he never calls you out of something unless he is calling you into something deeper, something truer, something more alive than what you've settled for. So he whispers now, with the tenderness of a father who has watched you wander, but never stopped following you. Beloved, holiness begins where honesty begins. Return to me in the small moments where your heart first drifted, not through grand promises you cannot sustain, not through striving or spiritual performance, but through the quiet, ordinary choices that reopen the doors you once closed without noticing. A pause before you scroll, a breath before you speak, a confession before the lie settles, a blessing instead of comparison, a moment of rest instead of the rush to prove your worth, a turning inward instead of numbing the ache. Holiness lives there, in those tiny, sacred choices that seem too small to matter, but heaven sees them, heaven honors them, heaven builds whole lives from moments like these. And if you listen closely, you will hear him calling you into that life. Not a life without struggle, but a life where struggle is no longer your master. Not a life without effort, but a life where effort is no longer your identity. Not a life without wounds, but a life where wounds are met with healing instead of hiding. So let this be your quiet declaration, a soft line drawn in the sand, where drift becomes return. Lord, search my habits, awaken my heart, teach me to choose you in the small things where holiness begins. And as you do, he will meet you there, in the silence, in the stillness, in the gentle reordering of your inner world. Hidden battles will begin to bow, old patterns will loosen, joy will rise again, like morning over a long night. For the God who calls you is the God who restores you, and the path back to Him is paved with steps so small, so simple, so sacred, that even the weary can walk them.